Les stratégies de plateforme ont pour but de faciliter l'échange de biens et de services entre deux ou plusieurs groupes interdépendants, souvent des producteurs et des consommateurs. Dans notre entretien avec Benoît Reillier de launchworks.co, nous discutons de son livre intitulé Platform Strategies, dont il a tiré une version en bande dessinée. Dans ce livre, il nous fournit ses prédictions sur l'avenir des plateformes commerciales. Selon lui, les stratégies de plateforme ne remplaceront pas tous les types d'entreprises traditionnelles. Ainsi, elles devraient plutôt nous inspirer que nous effrayer, car elles offrent des possibilités illimitées pour les modèles d'entreprises mixtes à l'avenir. Des interviews, des chiffres, des faits, des études. Pas de blabla, ce sont les podcasts de Visionary Marketing disponibles sur toutes les bonnes chaînes de balado-diffusion. Bonjour et bienvenue dans les podcasts de Visionary Marketing. Le sujet du jour, comprendre les stratégies de plateforme aujourd'hui et demain avec Benoît Reillier, auteur du livre Platform Strategies chez Duno en 2018. Une version illustrée existe également sur le site launchworks.co. Parmi les entreprises qui suivent le modèle d'affaires de plateforme, on peut citer avec Benoît Reillier les plateformes Airbnb, Uber, Google et les marketplaces tels que eBay et Amazon. Toutefois, à mesure qu'avance l'ère des médias sociaux, les contenus hébergés par des sociétés telles que YouTube, TikTok et d'autres plateformes sociales représentent désormais une part non négligeable de l'activité des plateformes selon l'auteur. Du point de vue du consommateur, les plateformes se développent de diverses manières en fonction des besoins et envies de leurs clients. Citons un site de voyage comme Expedia par exemple, qui facilite la réservation d'un voyage complet sur un seul site web, ou d'autres comme Tinder lorsqu'on cherche un partenaire romantique. Benoît explique que le concept de plateforme n'est pas toujours simple car il peut avoir de multiples définitions. Ce qui différencie ce type d'entreprise des autres, c'est que leurs organisations sont entièrement construites autour d'un modèle d'entreprise qui attire les participants, les met en relation, les connecte et leur permet d'effectuer des transactions. Benoît Reillier ajoute « Les places de marché créent de la valeur en permettant aux gens d'être connectés ». Comme le décrit Benoît dans son opus de bande dessinée Platform Strategy, les entreprises plateformes ne tirent pas leur avantage concurrentiel de la qualité de leur chaîne de valeur comme les entreprises traditionnelles. C'est parce que la dynamique traditionnelle de l'entreprise commence par l'achat de biens matériels et l'ajout de valeur à ces biens. Il a donné l'exemple d'un constructeur automobile qui construit et crée une voiture à partir de matières premières ou de produits semi-finis. Les modèles d'entreprise traditionnels sont basés sur des processus linéaires, nous dit-il, qui résultent de leur capacité interne à transformer ces processus de fabrication en valeur au profit de leurs clients. Les entreprises de plateforme sont totalement différentes, nous dit-il, puisqu'elles ne font qu'orchestrer leurs écosystèmes. Les entreprises à plateforme n'ont pas à se soucier des stocks, par exemple. Elles n'achètent rien à personne. Tout ce qu'elles font, nous dit-il, c'est mettre en relation des personnes qui possèdent quelque chose avec des personnes qui veulent l'acheter. Les modèles d'entreprise plateforme reposent donc sur ces principes qui ne s'appliquent pas aux entreprises traditionnelles, constate-t-il. Il existe deux règles principales, l'effet de réseau et l'élasticité des prix. Prenons l'effet de réseau. Les réseaux se caractérisent par des externalités positives, nous dit-il. Tous les membres du réseau en bénéficient. Plus il y a de nouveaux membres qui rejoignent ce réseau, plus sa valeur est grande pour tous ses membres. C'est ce que Benoît appelle l'effet de réseau, un grand principe sous-jacent qui confère de la valeur à la plateforme. Au début, il est très facile de convaincre de nouvelles personnes de rejoindre un nouveau réseau, a-t-il ajouté. S'il n'y a que nous deux dans un réseau, il ne se portera pas très bien. Nous devrons alors recruter de nouveaux membres sans relâche. Cependant, une fois que vous avez atteint une certaine masse critique, peut-être des milliers de membres, ce qui se passe, c'est que les gens commencent à repérer ce réseau et sa valeur, et ils commencent alors à se développer de manière organique. Ensuite, il y a l'élasticité des prix. Il peut sembler à certains que la fixation des prix soit plus facile pour les plateformes que pour les entreprises traditionnelles. Cela s'explique par le fait qu'elles sont maîtresses de leur propre écosystème, ou du moins c'est ce qu'il semble. Toutefois, Benoît nous avertit que les apparences peuvent être trompeuses. Même si elles semblent avoir un contrôle total sur leur structure tarifaire, ajoute-t-il, les plateformes marchent sur des œufs lorsqu'elles décident de les modifier. Parce que ces écosystèmes de réseau sont des systèmes complexes, changer la façon dont vous facturez l'un de vos membres peut avoir un impact sérieux sur tous les autres. En d'autres termes, si une plateforme commerciale n'est pas assez prudente au moment où elle décide de modifier sa structure tarifaire, il se peut qu'elle commence à perdre des membres. Si votre activité de plateforme crée trop de friction, elle risque de devenir moins attrayante pour les nouveaux venus, souligne Benoît. Les entreprises traditionnelles ne se préoccupent pas trop de l'élasticité des prix, mais les plateformes doivent être plus prudentes à cet égard. Alors quel est l'avenir de l'activité de plateforme ? Au fur et à mesure que les plateformes gagnent en popularité, nous dit-il, des inquiétudes se font jour quant à la possibilité que les modèles commerciaux des plateformes prennent le pas sur les modèles commerciaux traditionnels et perturbent l'économie. Ainsi, Airbnb s'est attiré de nombreuses critiques pour avoir perturbé le secteur de l'hôtellerie dans de nombreux endroits. Cela s'est produit à New York, à Londres, à Paris par exemple. Il existe de nombreux autres exemples comme celui d'Amazon. La société Internet de Seattle a suscité des craintes de perturbation du commerce de détail par le commerce électronique. Plus récemment, l'incursion du géant du commerce de détail, qui emploie aujourd'hui plus de 1,2 million de personnes dans le monde, dans le commerce de détail alimentaire, a suscité encore plus d'inquiétudes. Il y a beaucoup d'autres exemples. Pour autant, Benoît ne croit pas que les plateformes mettront fin au commerce traditionnel. À l'avenir, de nombreuses organisations mélangeront différents types de modèles d'entreprise. Les chaînes de valeur existeront encore dans 30 ans, de même que les modèles d'entreprise de plateforme. Les entreprises combineront sans aucun doute plusieurs modèles d'entreprise. En fonction du secteur et du produit, les plateformes seront le modèle d'entreprise privilégié, tandis que pour d'autres secteurs ou produits, les chaînes de valeur continueront à jouer un rôle déterminant dans l'organisation de l'entreprise. Il se peut que nous fassions des affaires dans le métaverse, a-t-il poursuivi, mais d'autres modèles commerciaux plus traditionnels persisteront. Compte tenu de toutes les technologies qui apparaissent actuellement, conclut Benoît, y compris le Web 3 et le Web immersif, ce mélange de différents modèles d'entreprise nous permettra de gérer les organisations distribuées d'une manière beaucoup plus efficace grâce à la combinaison de tous ces modèles d'entreprise. Les craintes qu'Uber et d'autres plateformes fassent disparaître tout autre type d'entreprise, comme on le pensait il y a à peine 10 ans avec la fameuse ubérisation, étaient probablement exagérées. Les modèles commerciaux des plateformes pourraient au contraire être une corde de plus à l'arc des entreprises traditionnelles qui feraient mieux de réfléchir à la manière dont elles pourraient se réinventer. Les principales pratiques commerciales des plateformes devraient nous inspirer plutôt que nous effrayer. Je vous laisse en compagnie de Benoît Reillier pour cette interview que nous avons enregistrée en anglais depuis son domicile de Londres. Well, I'm here with Benoît Reillier from launchworks.co, and we're going to talk about your cartoon entitled Platform Strategy Illustrated. And I have quite a few questions. The first one would be about platform business models. So what are they and how do they work?
This is a very important question because the definition of platforms is not straightforward. As you know, for some people, platforms are shoes. Some people talk about oil platforms. Some people talk about political platforms. So it's got many different meanings. And even in business, when you talk about platforms to a board or a leadership team, you'll find that the chief product officer looks at platforms as things that you can reuse, a little bit like Legos, and the chief technical or the IT guy, chief digital officer will look at platforms as a set of software and technologies that the company is building. And the CEO, of course, wants to look like Google, especially get the valuation of Google. So it's very important to have a clear definition. And when we looked at that, what we found is that platforms really are a type of organization, type of business model that attracts participants, match them, connect them, and enable them to transact.
Okay.
And that's a very
nothing to do with platform shoes then, and
nothing to do with platform shoes.
And so, just in plain English, maybe we can just drop a few names so that people understand what we're talking about. That's Uber, that's Airbnb, and all
exactly. So when you apply the lens I've just talked about, the definition of platforms, where you attract people, you connect them, and you enable them to transact, you'll find that all the marketplaces are types of platforms. So you can have marketplaces of products, like eBay, which was one of the first ones, but you've got many more now, including Le Bon Coin in France, for example. You've got marketplaces of services. You've got things like Malt in France or Upwork in the US, marketplace of freelance. You've got marketplaces of content like YouTube. In many ways, social networks are marketplaces as well of content. People can consume content, exchange content, create content. And you've got financial services that are working like platforms. So people forget, but payment cards are a type of platforms. You need a critical mass of people with payment cards in their pockets and merchants accepting the cards, and you connect them and enable them to transact. And you've got app stores, which could be seen as marketplaces of digital products. And anything that really creates value by allowing people to be connected. So, when you look for holidays, you go to Expedia. If you're looking for a house to buy, you go through Se Loger, which is a platform in France. And if you want to find a life partner, you may want to use a dating platform like Bumble, Tinder, or Happen.
Okay. All right. So if I understand well, platforms are the modern way of doing business. And what you say in your cartoon is that they have no value chain at the heart of their business as a competitive advantage. So how does it work then?
So you've got different types of platforms. Pure platforms don't have a value chain. That's a big difference, because traditional firms, they're used to buy things, maybe raw material, and add value to them, manufacture a car, for example, and then sell them. And even if you're a retailer, you can buy wholesale and then you distribute retail, and it's also a value chain. So it's a very linear process, and most firms, work like that. It's a very powerful process, but platforms don't work like that, and it's quite new. So they don't buy raw material; they just orchestrate an ecosystem. So it's basically they connect people who do the work in some ways. So when you want to scale very quickly and you want innovation and diversity, so if you think about, eBay or Amazon Marketplace, you want millions of products to be available. The most effective way of doing that is through a platform, because you're not doing the stock. You're not effectively buying all these products yourself. You're just connecting people who have these products with people who want these products. So it's a competitive advantage when you need scale, when you need innovation, when you need to achieve some of these things. In other settings, it's not the right model. So if you want to produce cars, for example, you want a value chain. But if you want to have an app store with lots of people in an ecosystem creating new games, etc., you want a platform at the heart of that.
Okay, so it depends on the industry. It depends on what kind of sector we're talking about. And these platforms behave in a certain way. You're listing a number of how many is it? Five different characteristics, and so that's very intellectual. Externalities, whatever that means. So network effects, tipping point, cross-site price elasticities. Well, it's even more intellectual. Substitutes versus complements.
Yes.
Can you expatiate on that?
Sure. So what we found is that platforms are underpinned by some interesting economic principles that do not apply to traditional firms. And you mentioned them, and they sound quite complicated and intellectual, as you say. And it's the kind of term that economists would use. But they're quite simple. So we talk about positive externalities, which is basically when you benefit from something that you're not responsible for. So if the lady next to me in the tube, is wearing a lovely perfume that I enjoy, it's a positive externality. And networks are characterized by positive externalities. So somebody joining a network, suddenly everybody already in a network benefits from being able to contact this new person. They haven't done anything, but there is somebody else joining the network, so the network is more valuable for everybody. So we talk about network effects effectively because networks, it's the positive externalities that networks benefit from. So that's network effects. And when you start a network, it's very difficult to start. You need to convince people that they need to join your network. If there is a network with just both of us, Jan, we'll have to recruit actively other people to join us. But once you've reached maybe thousands of people, maybe you've connected all the buildings in a city, etc., suddenly what happens is that organically people start to notice the network, see the value of the network, and they join the network naturally. And that's when the network has reached this critical mass.
That's the tipping point thing.
That's the tipping point.
Has nothing to do with Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, is it?
Yes, I mean, that's the exact same concept that that he talks about, and that is relevant for platforms.
All right. Okay, that one I understand. I mean, the cross-site price elasticities are sort of a bit more far-fetched.
So that's complicated, but that's because platforms are at the heart of ecosystems. They don't just sell to clients, they basically orchestrate the ecosystem. So you've got various contributors. They've got lots of flexibility with pricing, but they also need to be careful about what they change when they change pricing. So it's a complex term to say that if you start charging somebody in the ecosystem, you need to be careful about what happens to other participants. So if you start charging people for listing goods and services on your platform, like eBay, so suddenly you say it's €1 if you want to list something, then you've got a lot less choice or inventory on your platform, because people will be careful before listing because it's expensive, so you're creating friction. And then suddenly, because there is less choice, then your platform may be less attractive for people on the other side who come to the platform. So cross-price elasticity is something that traditional firms are not really worried about, but platforms need to think about, because when you change the price on one side of the platform, it has an impact on the other side. Okay. And I think the last concept you mentioned,
substitutes versus complements,
correct, is also an interesting and important one, because traditional firms are very worried about substitutes, and they focus on that because substitutes are effectively competitors. So, if you sell butter, the other brand of butter is your substitute and your competitor, and you benchmark yourself against their price, and that's how you look at the industry. Platforms are very good at attracting complements. So when you're Apple, you're very good at attracting people that will develop games and apps that actually add value to your ecosystem. So if every time there is a new app, a new game that becomes available on the App Store, everybody who has an iPhone is a little bit richer. You've got something else you can do. And Apple is very good at creating the environment where third parties, other people, can actually add value to the platform through peripherals, through apps, through different content types, etc. So
now we understand everything about platform business. We know how it works and who they are. And I have a few questions about that, because we keep talking about the same usual suspects. I mean, Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, and the like. Are there any other examples that we can choose from?
Sure. So it's a huge category. So first of all, it's probably helpful to step back. I mean, you had platforms that existed even before the digital economy was born. So if you go to Istanbul, there is the Grand Bazaar, and it's effectively a platform. It's a marketplace. The Grand Bazaar doesn't sell itself anything, but it attracts merchants and it attracts clients, and it just manages the security and of the place. So it's a physically incarnated platform. It's been around for centuries. I think it was set up in 1400 something, so 15th century, and it's a bit like eBay, but it's physically present somewhere. So what the digital technologies have allowed is to scale this globally. So when you look at the platforms over the past 15, 20 years. So if we go back in 2000, roughly, you look at the largest companies in the world, and you'll find that General Electric is the largest company in the world at the time, and you've got Walmart, and you've got Exxon, you've got these companies that have been around for a long time, and they're value chains. At the heart of their businesses, you've got value chains. And And then you start seeing platforms appearing in the top 10. And in 2016, I think that's the first year where the top 5 companies in the world are all platforms. At the heart, they're platforms. So it's the GAFAMs, or the FANGs, as our Americans call them. But, Google, Apple, and Microsoft, and Facebook, etc. And just behind the GAFAMs, you have the BATs, of course. So Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, the Asian equivalents. So the largest companies in the world now are largely platform powered businesses. And even if you go below, because here I'm talking about the largest market cap companies, but even if you look at startups or scale-ups in France, many of the successful companies over the past 10 years have got platform capabilities effectively, and BlaBlaCar in France, and Malt, and many scale-ups are powered by platform businesses.
Okay, a few examples in the UK, maybe.
Lots of examples in the UK. We've got in real estate, in the real estate market, each country has got its set of real estate platforms. So, in the US, it's Zillow. In the UK, it's Zoopla. In France, it's Sologer. So you find, across sectors, you'll find Doctolib in France. There's an equivalent here in health, in education, in retail. Across sectors and industries, we see leading platforms emerging.
Okay, so it's not just about Amazon and Airbnb. I mean, there's many, many others, and they're all different according to sectors and countries. Right. Now, going back to Uber, it was flavor of the month 10 years ago, but is it still so fashionable, and is it so successful?
So, I mean, Uber is an interesting one, and I must confess that but clearly platforms are not immune to bad leadership and mistakes. And I think it's fair to say that Uber has had its fair share of problems, and I guess many of them are also related to Travis Kalanick. So he was the founder of Uber, but he's been fired from the company by the board. He's been sued by his investors for fraud, and clearly his leadership style has been deemed lacking by many. So that has put Uber in a difficult position over the years. Although I must say that the new CEO was the former leader of Expedia, Dara Khosrowshahi, I think, and he's doing quite well. And Uber itself, I think, has had a good impact on the travel market globally. Why has Uber been successful? Well, if you look at the pre-Uber world, and it's not just in France; it's a global phenomenon in the US, in many European countries. The choice was limited. You had the numerus clausus, so the number of taxis were limited everywhere. The service was poor. It was a monopoly, so there is no incentive to have good service, and you had very little innovation. I mean, if you wanted a cab, to catch a cab in Paris, if it was raining, then good luck to you. In the pre-Uber era, it was almost impossible. You had to know where to go. You didn't have any app, and they were all very busy, of course, because you didn't have enough. And Uber, in a way, created competition and innovation. And now you've got lots of cabs. And an interesting twist is that even people who use cabs and only use cabs, taxis, and I've always used taxis, have somehow benefited from Uber, because now taxis have innovated. They've had some incentive to improve their service. You can book them on digital apps. They accept credit cards, etc., etc. So I guess the quality of service has improved overall. And it's Uber, but it's Taxify, Bolt. I mean, all the companies offering transport services, really.
So in essence, these platforms like the ones you mentioned, or Lyft and Uber and all the others, they basically shook the market, innovated, and then everybody else caught up with them.
I think that's fair. I wouldn't say caught up, but I think because you still have some people who are catching up. But yes, I think that's fair. They're now part of the landscape, and they're very successful for a reason.
So going back to these platforms, they are often criticized for squeezing value out of their members and not abiding to regulations as well. And even resorting sometimes to modern slavery. I mean, like Amazon Turk is infamous about this, and all the AI work which is being carried out in many places of Africa, like Nigeria, Kenya, and other places. Is it viable in the long run?
So, I mean, I think this is a very important question in many ways. Platforms can be used for lots of things, and they clearly need to abide by the laws and legislations, and especially the early platforms probably have been guilty of scaling quickly, not asking themselves questions about whether or not what they were doing was legal, or when the platform was becoming global, they probably didn't spend much time thinking about how to comply with all the regulations of all the different countries that they could be accessed from and used by, etc. So we've seen excesses. And we've effectively seen platforms that were operating outside of the legal frameworks of the various countries, and that clearly that's a problem, and that needs to be regulated. And the Amazon Turk, I guess, is a good example of a platform that. I mean, you can't really make a living out of these kinds of jobs, but I guess the equivalent would be more like this is more about tasks like doing surveys like you would do outside of a university for a couple of days, and then it's not going to be a lifelong job. So these are super very badly paid tasks that platforms can sort of facilitate. So clearly, personally, I don't think this is sustainable at all as a business, and many of these platforms are now trying to work backwards and effectively start to comply with the regulation and become sustainable. Because if you have a platform that doesn't pay enough money, and that's a big difference with a traditional business. If you don't pay enough money as a platform, people won't come to your platform anymore, and therefore you can't provide the service. And if you do something illegal, then clearly it should be forbidden, and you shouldn't be able to operate in all countries in the same way. So I think the Mechanical Turk, I haven't checked for a while, but I think the Mechanical Turk is, for example, now starting to prevent access from various countries and regulate and check the ID of the various people, etc.
It's actually Amazon Turk, because the Mechanical Turk is the one from the 18th century. But okay, I get you. But actually, it's a bit of a trick, isn't it? I mean, it reminds me of the early days of Amazon when they weren't charging VAT, for instance. And the very early days in 1996 or something, when you would buy books from the US, from the UK, they would send the books over to the UK, and they would, just basically go under the radar and nobody would notice. But very, very shortly, Customs and Excise did notice, and then they started capturing this and then sending the books somewhere out there in the suburbs, far away from the city centre, and then you had to drive, a long way out to the west of London to find actually your books, and then pay taxes, by the way. So it defeated the object. But isn't it a bit of a trick, really, that these disruptive platforms are actually coming into a market, and in order to disrupt the market, they actually do it voluntarily, bypassing the law, bypassing regulations, using some of the loopholes in the regulations. Is that the new way of innovating, that you actually have to cheat and not play by the book? So that it's a bit unfair, isn't it? I mean, is it something that we have to encourage people to do, or is it something that we should regulate and then stop, actually, in certain countries at least?
So, I mean, first of all, let's be clear. People who don't pay taxes or bypass rules, or organizations that do anything that is illegal, clearly this is not something that can be condoned, or that is even sustainable. So, and this is not just platforms. I mean, any international organization that use transfer pricing in a way that allows them to pay less taxes in various countries or things like that. These are far beyond the business
God knows
model.
they are few and far between.
The business model of platforms. But yes, platforms have been incredibly successful, and therefore have scaled a lot, and that has created lots of challenges. And in some cases, they've ended up breaking things first and then asking for permission later. And that's why they get caught, and then they have to change their practices. But there is fundamentally something that people believe often, it's that only when you break things, or when you don't pay some taxes, do you get the competitive advantage that the platforms have. And that's not true. So the model itself is very, very powerful. And you don't need to avoid VAT or do some arbitrage, or not respect some regulations for the model to be sustainable. So in some cases, it's absolutely true that some platforms have done things that were not right, and not defending platforms who do bad things, obviously. But if you look at a platform business model at scale, and it pays all its taxes and everything, and it can be incredibly efficient, and we've got a proof of that around us every day.
Okay, so that's good news. So what can we expect in the future then? Is it going to be a model? I mean, barring a few exceptions like motor cars, as you mentioned. Is that a model which is going to be a model for everyone, or almost everyone?
So I don't think it's going to be a model for everyone, but I think it's going to be a model that is going to be combined with almost all existing traditional firms need to start thinking about the impact of platforms on them, and many firms will want to combine that model with their existing activities. So it's not a or, are you a value chain or a platform? It's increasingly an and. We are doing this with a value chain. So we are manufacturing our iPhones and our laptops, even Apple, and clearly as value chains that are very important. But the value of the ecosystem is the App Store, it's the content, and it's the platform. And it's the combination of the two that is becoming very powerful. And, we don't need to look far. If you want to look at even, retailers in France or elsewhere, if you're a DIY retailer and you sell hammers and nails and tools, you can use platforms to sell or to match complementary services, so plumbers and electricians and all that, who can help meet the needs of some of your clients who come because they don't want to just to buy a hammer, but they've got a project. You can have a platform, a content platform that has got videos on how to do things, tutos, DIY advice, and so on and so forth. You can add a platform of products maybe that you don't have in your store, but somebody else has, and you can have this long tail of choice and wide selection thanks to a product platform. And also, increasingly, you can have a platform for renting things. So, tools, I don't know if you use, some power tools that you may not justify buying for yourself, but you need, a week, a year or something. You can rent it now increasingly. And all the circular economy, many of the processes we talk about that basically need to be sustainable are powered by platform businesses. So if you want to avoid food waste, if you want to, get somebody in your car when you go somewhere with BlaBlaCar, etc., all these models are powered by platforms. So it's combined with, for traditional firms, platforms are increasingly combined with existing businesses. And yes, they will definitely be part of the future.
But when you mean combine, do you mean that they should be taken over by larger companies, or that larger companies should actually start building their own platforms?
So you've got the two.
If they are able to.
You've got the two paths, and it's quite difficult for traditional companies to build organically from within, because they've got processes and rules that often are the ones to manage value chains, and they're very different from the logic of platforms. I talked about externalities, network effects. Well, these are not concepts that traditional organizations are familiar with, but you can, in some cases, develop internally, maybe with an accelerator or a venture arm, often. So it's within the group, but it's not. It's a little bit separate when you start the platform, or you acquire, and we see both. So Walmart acquired Jet.com, the platform. Accor acquired One Fine Stay to compete with Airbnb, and you've got the two models.
Okay, and you mentioned that it was sometimes difficult for larger businesses and more value chain orientated businesses to build their own platforms. Is it difficult, or is it just not possible? For many of them, it is not. I mean, let's face the music. I mean, many of them have failed, haven't they?
And it's true that it's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. I mean, we now have a number of success stories where you can see the platform project being launched and embedded in the organization and scaled and complementary and working. But you're right in saying it's not straightforward. And what we found, because we advise lots of traditional businesses, and we found that the training, the mindset of the leadership is the first battle. And when the board understands what it is, how it works, how it can be complementary to what the firm is doing, and it's got sort of backing from the leadership, then you have a chance. Very often, however, that's not the case, and people do not even have the same definition as we discussed when we started this conversation, and that creates problems, and people will go in all kinds of different directions, and clearly that's not how you have a platform strategy that is successful for the long term.
Yeah, it requires a lot of culture changes as well, doesn't it? I mean, the way that larger businesses work is not really apt for platform business.
Absolutely, there is a rewiring when we do training. So we do sort of training of management teams, and we teach in business schools and so on and so forth. We find that there is really a mental model that is associated with ecosystems that are open and have got various stakeholders, and you influence, you create governance, but you don't really control in the same way. It's not a closed value chain. So all the books that have been written about management often are based or predicated upon a traditional firm, and that's really enshrined into the mindset of the people in organizations. So you need to change that. So as you said, cultural change is a very important ingredient for a successful platform strategy.
And talking of which, obviously platforms have a leg up in that game, and larger businesses don't. But still, when we look at how Airbnb disrupted the hospitality market, Marriott and the likes are still around, aren't they? Even though COVID-19 has taken its toll with these people. I mean, we've had the large Marriott hotel very next to where I live. It's been closed for 3 years now, and is now being refurbished. So after 3 years, which means that no, they didn't die. They're still there. Airbnb didn't kill them.
No, there's hope, and I think in many ways platforms are more complementary than substitutes, as we were saying. So business travelers typically carry on going to hotels. You go for a day or two, you know what to expect, and many hotels and well-known brands from Accor and Hilton and Marriott and others are doing reasonably well when the world is open for business. But if you go and want to experience life as a local, including in places where hotels up until recently were not even allowed, like in Cuba, for example, it was very difficult to open a hotel, and you had hundreds of Airbnbs because they didn't need to find the land and build something and get license, etc. So it's a very flexible and very powerful way of scaling hospitality services. And by the way, all the brands you mentioned, one of the reasons why they're still there, Marriott and others, is because they've launched their own platforms as well. So Marriott now has a platform. I can't remember its name, but it's
Bonvoy, I think.
So that's the loyalty platform. They've got a villa platform, which is something like Villa Homes and Villa or something.
Okay.
And same with Accor. Accor has acquired platforms like One Fine Stay.
But coming back to Airbnb, did it actually disrupt the hospitality market? Or did it only merely disrupt a small part of it, like, for instance, the good old B&B?
I think it did disrupt the market, but you're right. I think it did disrupt maybe more some segments of the market, and the segments that were probably the most disrupted were the ones that were the least differentiated, the least visible, and Airbnb just became a more convenient way of booking. And in some cases, you'll find that some B&Bs now find themselves on Airbnb. So it becomes a distribution channel to people that didn't have one before.
But there's one rule of thumb in the internet business that was edicted by Seth Godin, I think it is the winner takes almost all. And Airbnb has taken that market. I mean, whatever it disrupted, there's no space for anyone else, is it?
So it's true that when you have network effects, so the winner takes almost all is a result of the fact that when you've got positive externalities or network effects, everybody benefits from one big player, effectively, one big network. So the natural equilibrium is everybody joins one network, and that could keep everybody else out. But what we find is actually it's a bit more complicated than that. It starts like that, and then the offer is often deemed too generic, the offer of the platform. And you start seeing smaller platforms focused on a subset of the market winning. So, eBay at some point, one of the very first platforms to scale, people thought, they're established. There is no way we're going to displace them. And segment by segment, you saw platforms emerge. So in fashion now, people go on Vinted and Depop and Zalando, and you've got dozens of platforms that are competing in that market, and it's the same. Market by market. So I think you may find that there are emerging competitors to Airbnb, even though they're big and established, and they're being attacked on specific segments like premium luxury or expensive villas. Now it's going to some other players, and so it's not a done deal. It's never a done deal, even for platforms.
Okay, the final question. Let's say we fast forward to 2050 and then look back to the current period. Will we see something like, platforms, they were sort of flavor of the month 30 years ago rather. But, it's not that important anymore. Or is it going to be, on the contrary, something that is going to take over the world and then, everything else will be a platform?
No, I don't think it will take over everything. I mean, 2050 is it's a long time, but it's not that long. I think it will be part of the landscape still, and I think what we will see is that organizations mix different types of business models. And you will still have value chains in 30 years' time. You will still have platforms, lots of them. Often they will be combined. So for some things, the platform will be the core organization, and for other things, it will be the value chain. But you will have other types of ways of creating value and organizing the business. So every time there is a new technology, you can do two things. You can do what you were doing before more effectively, but you can also organize yourself differently. So if you look at all the technologies in the pipeline, Web3, virtual reality, we'll probably in 2050 we'll probably have a mix of all these business models, and we'll probably be able to manage distributed organizations in a better way, probably have activities in the metaverse, but it will still be a combination of different business models. So platforms will be part of the landscape even in 30 years' time, but we will certainly have new organizational forms that will be enabled by the technology.
Surtout, n'oubliez pas de mettre une bonne note à ce podcast si vous l'avez apprécié.